It's officially Oscar review season. My favorite season of the year. It's time to talk about some Oscar movies. It's September, and you all know how big of a fan of September releases I am for Oscars. Nothing's ever fucking gone wrong. So why not keep shoving shit in there that we think can be nominated so that it doesn't get nominated? So we saw the Goldfinch, which a while back was a heavy contender. I think I talked about it in Oscar Contenders Volume 1, maybe 2. I don't fucking remember. It's the new John Crowley film. It's based on the Pulitzer Prize novel, and it's kind of shit. And to be, serious, I think most people have the same criticism of this film, and I think that's very found in reality, which is it should still be a book. It has no place being a film. You can see while you're watching it where this would make a great book, and you can also see while you're watching it why it's a bad movie. I don't read, because I'm not a fucking nerd, but it's been explained to me that the book itself is really good, which makes sense, because there's so much story to tell, a lot of intricate plot lines, a lot of character dynamics, a lot of different relationships that would have time to be developed and fleshed out in a book, and very simply don't in a movie. What we're watching plot-wise does not translate on screen. What translates is a very muddled, messy, all over the place, disjointed film. You very often forget what the conflict is. You don't know what the point of the scene that you're watching is in the overall scheme of the film and of the plot, and you find yourself at an emotional disconnect with the film. You don't care for many of the characters. You don't care for much of what's happening at all, because you often forget what the central point of the film you're watching is. There's a whole point where they're living in Nevada, and that was where I remember going, I don't even know what the point of what I'm watching is right now anymore. You're still throwing new characters at me an hour and 15 minutes in, and I think that's part of why it feels so goddamn long. Part of it is because it refuses to end. There's about 6 different endings to this movie. But the other reason is there's too much happening, and there's too many things coming in at too many different times. In a book, you can have characters be introduced halfway through, and you can still give them an arc, because there's enough time to do that. When you're still throwing main characters at me halfway through the movie, that's not going to work for me. So you find yourself with all these different plots, and all these different characters, and all these branches of things that are happening, and you're going, I want one thing to focus on right now. I want one track that I'm sticking on that's maybe got a couple of side tracks that I'm still capable of following along, knowing what that main track is. I can still see it in my peripherals. There are too many times where you distract and then you go, hold on, wait, I don't know where we're going. I don't know where we are right now. It reminds me of Live by Night, actually, which I thought was a very similar problem. I think that when the Goldfinch is on the right track, it's at its best. I'm not saying it's a garbage fire. I think there are good things and there are good moments. The plot itself is interesting enough to keep you encapsulated in the moments where it's on the right plot, but when it diverts from that is when you get disinterested, and the last act is very unusual and conflicting with the tone of the film, and it just goes a little too far. I think in the book there was probably more build to that, and that felt more natural, but the scale jumps far too quickly in the last act of this film, and it feels very unnatural, very forced, very just strange as a whole. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that the direction is not very good. John Crowley kind of, I don't think, knows how to approach making a movie like this, which is so packed full of stuff. I don't think he could figure out how to make it visually interesting or conceptually interesting, which is like, you have Deakins, who always makes a beautiful film, and the film looks good, but in terms of Deakins' whole filmography and his line of work, this is one of his more just like fine looking movies, because he doesn't really have a ton to work with in terms of direction. I don't think he had much in terms of interesting set pieces, or, you know, he was just given like a tracking shot or a shot reverse shot, and all of a sudden he's going, well, I mean, I can make this look fine, but it's just going to look like most movies. You know, when you pair Deakins with Denis Villeneuve, or you pair him with Sam Mendes, you're going to get a visually fucking stunning film, and this one is not stunning. It looks good. I mean, the cinematography is good, don't get me wrong, but it's buried by dull direction, and it's buried by editing that's not very good. The editing is really tough in this movie. I think that's sort of accredited to the direction being a little choppy, but the editing itself is not great. And I think, you know, touching on that dull direction, the movie is dull, and it's very artificial feeling as a result of that direction, of the dialogue, and a lot of the performances. The dialogue in particular is what I think is most artificial. You kind of don't ever feel like you're watching real people, and I get that sometimes that's the point. And when it's the point, it still kind of doesn't work. It still feels like you're watching robots, and that's that same emotional disconnect, right? You find yourself not really caring about any particular character or relationship because they don't seem like real people. They seem like pawns to move what is kind of an interesting story forward, and you're left kind of just in shock and awe and going, what was the point? You know, I didn't care about this film and its characters, and when it tries to be emotional, it fails because you don't find yourself connected to any of the things in this film. The acting is pretty not good. The only performance I was like, they were great, was Jeffrey Wright, who I thought did a very good job in this movie. He makes artificial dialogue sound organic and natural. He's the only one that seems to know how to do it. Ansel Elgort has his moments, but as a whole, I thought he was kind of a weak leading man. The kid, Oakes Fergley, is not good. Finn Wolfhard is not very good in this movie. Nicole Kidman is trying, but she's got like no direction towards her character, so she's not very good. Same thing with Sarah Paulson. She's trying her best, and there are moments where the two of them, I think, shine, but as a whole, they didn't work. Luke Wilson is really not very good in this film, so that's a big part of the emotional disconnect, is having a lot of acting that's just very clouded and doesn't really work for you entirely. There's not a whole ton to talk about with this film, I think, is the biggest thing, because at the end of the day, the biggest problem is it's a novel adaptation that shouldn't exist. You have a book that I'm sure is an astounding book, which, you know, gives time to develop things that it needs to, and is able to divert from that main story a little more often, but in this, it just comes across as disjointed. There's very simply too much happening and not enough time. It reminds me a lot of Fantastic Beasts 2, where J.K. Rowling tried to write the film as a book, and it very simply doesn't work at all. You have too much happening, you have too many characters, you have too much story, and I think that most people are in consensus of that, and that's why the film isn't being received well. I don't think it's a garbage fire. You know, it's competently made. You know, it's like the fucking movie's in focus. It's coherent. The story lands in a place that makes sense. But like, there's still so many scenes and plot lines that leave you questioning why. You know, what was the point of watching what I just watched? I think all of that results in a very slow pace too. The movie's 2.5 hours long, and it feels it. By God, it feels it. You know, you've got even like It Chapter 2, I think, doesn't feel its runtime. Because maybe for the wrong reasons, maybe because of how much fun I was having watching that piece of garbage. But I really don't think it's a trash fire. I think, you know, like I said, the direction is dull. That's not to say it's awful. You know, he knows what to do with a camera. It's just, it's so infuriatingly dull and bland that, you know, you're left going, eh. You know, and that's why the cinematography isn't as good as it should be. That's why the performances and the dialogue aren't as good as it should be, because, you know, with those artificial moments that are supposed to be artificial, I think you have potential for something really interesting. You know, to see the dynamic between a character who is a normal human being and speaks like a natural human being and a character who doesn't speak like a natural human being, but the direction is not there for that. Everybody folds into this one category of people who don't sound like people, they sound like fucking robots, and you're left going, I couldn't give less of a shit about anything that I just watched in that movie. At the end of the day, there's no Oscar contention for this. Critics feel the same way as audiences do. You know, it's not a polarizing film. If anything, you could get Deakins in there, but I kind of have a feeling like that might not even happen. So, you know, it's not one you have to see. There's plenty more films coming soon that are going to be far more important and necessary to see for the Oscar season. And it's September, man. You know, you put your film in September, you're destined to not have it be nominated for Oscars. I'm telling you, there's no way. It's never going to happen. So, there you go. That's my review for The Goldfinch. Let me know what you guys thought of the film in the comments below. I'm very interested to hear all of your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.